a ball moving with a speed that is initially with a speed of 17 meters per second. Now the keywords in this question, all right, a ball moving with a speed of 17 meters per second strikes an identical ball that is initially at rest. Now, what does it mean by identical ball? So when the question tells you two objects, they are identical, it carries the meaning M1 equals to M2. So in this case, we are going to use M for both of them, right? So after the collisions, the incoming ball has become deviated 45 degrees from the original direction. And the struck ball, it moves at a 30 degrees from the origin of the direction as shown in the figure. So as you can see here, now, just now you asked me why there's two theta. Now, theta 1 belongs to object 1. In this example, it is 45 degrees. Okay, so it belongs to object 1. Whereas theta 2, now you have 30 degrees and it belongs to the second object. Okay, that's why we have two theta. So let's see, how are we going to calculate the speed of each ball? So now this question, it asks you to calculate the speed of each ball. We don't have V1, we don't have V2. What we do have is theta 2 and also theta 1. So let's see, how are we going to solve these questions? So again, let us begin with x component. Okay, x component. So x component, again, I'm going to start with these equations. This is what we call concept. So P initial along x component equals to summations P final along x component. So remember, this formula is very important because in exam, this formula itself is worth 1 mark. All right, before you solve the questions, as long as you write it down, you got 1 mark already. So summations P initial x equals to summations the momentum final x along x component. Initially, I have an object V1 moving at 17 meters per second. So M, okay, now I'm not going to write M1, M2. Why? Because both of them, they are known as M now. Okay, because they are identical. So if both objects, they are identical, it means M1 equals to M2. So to make it easier, I'm just going to write it as M. Okay, I'm just going to write as M. So M U1 plus M V1 equals to M. Now, if you look at my diagram, what I have here is a object moving at an angle. Therefore, V1x plus M V2x. All right. So when I expand these equations, now before I expand these equations, the reason why question give you the information identical is because it wants you to cancel out the m from the equation. So now you have 4m, they all have same value. Therefore, you can cancel it out. Okay, and therefore the next line would be 17 meters per second plus V1, which is at rest 0, equals to, now V1x and V2x, how am I going to calculate them? So you can leave it, but then if you leave it like this, it will be hard for you to solve the questions. So what am I going to do now? I want to expand the value. V1x is V1 cos 30 degree. Okay, V1 cos 30 degree plus V2, sorry, I make a mistake in my diagram. So this is not 30, this should be 1, this should be 2. So theta 1 is 45 degree, theta 2 is 30 degrees. So V1 cos 45 degree and V2 cos 30 degree. All right. So let's see, how are we going to solve it? Now, when it comes to a situation like this, okay, when you have a value in terms of cos and you know the angle, I would suggest you to calculate the values of cos theta first. You don't leave it in a trigo function. Why? Because when students leave it in the trigo function, students often feel panic. Okay, panic. Like, oh my goodness, how am I going to solve these questions? It looks complicated. I got a cos theta, I got a sin theta. What should I do? Okay, so you can press the calculator and get the value first. So cos 45 degree will give you 0.707 V1 plus cos 30 degree will give you 0.866 V2. Yeah. 6. All right, 866 V2. So now it seems like in normal equations with two unknowns, your equations with an x and y in an equations, right? So now V1 is just like x, V2 is just like y in your mathematical equations, in your simultaneous equations. So now you have equations 1. Okay, and then let's look at y component. Okay, let's look at y component. So y component, again, so I have summations p initial y equals to summations p final y. So m, now I'm not going to write initial again. Why? Because these questions obviously no initial y component. All right, so if you look at the diagram, initially it's moving along x component. Now, it's not always like this, yeah? Just at the examples given in your notes, coincidentally, both of them, they don't have initial y component. Sometimes you can have initial y component. So in that case, the equations will become m1 v1x plus m2 v2x. So you might need to resolve it before collision. So it could happen. But for these two example, the user's initial is equals to 0. Right? So it is equals to m1 v1y plus m2 v2y. So what am I going to do now? I want to cancel out the m again. Okay, why? Because m1 equals to m2 equals to m. So if you don't write the subscript, also can. You write the subscript, also can, but make sure you show it if you write subscript. So now I can cancel it out. Okay, I can cancel it out. So what next? So next, again, I'm going to expand my Vy. So 0 equals to, okay, V1. Okay, now let us go back to the diagram. If you look at diagram, V1, if I resolve V1, what am I going to get? So if I resolve V1, I will get x component going towards the right-hand side, V1x, and then I get a y component going down. So which means this V1y is a negative value. Okay, therefore, I'm going to put a negative here. So negative sine. Okay, negative. Okay, or I should put a negative in front of V to make it easier for you, not to confuse you. So, this is negative. So a negative V1, okay, negative V1 sine 45 degree, right? Negative V1 sine 45 degree. So plus, okay, now I don't know whether I want to plus a positive value or a negative value. Let me go back to the diagram. So if you look at the diagram, if you resolve V2, you get V2x along x component. Okay, and then you get a V2y towards positive direction. So in that case, my V2y is a positive value, right? Therefore, I have V2, okay, V2 sine 30 degrees. So don't need to add negative sign in front of V2, right? It is now a positive value. So just now, what do I have? Okay, I'm just going to rewrite it in a more tidy form. So a negative V1 is sine, sine 45 degree. Okay, so this is before, not before, this is for object 1. So why is it negative? Okay, why negative? Let us see. So this negative value, it exists because of, okay, because of here. So it is going down. Okay, so it is going down. Therefore, I have a negative V1. Whereas when it comes to V2, because it's going up, therefore I use a positive value here. All right, next step. So like I told you just now, whenever you have a cos degree, cos angles, or sine angles, and you have the angles, you have the values for angle, okay, you calculate the value first. You don't leave it in sine or cos. So now you have 0 equals to negative, okay, negative what? So 45 degree again is a 0.70 V1 plus, so sine 30 degree, you will have a 0.5 V2. So this is your second equation. Okay, this is your second equations. Now that you have two equation with two unknowns, so you solve the simultaneous equation. Okay, you solve simultaneous equations. So how to solve the simultaneous equations, I will leave it to you. Okay, matematik asas kamu cuba sendiri. So eventually you will get V1 equals to 8.80. Okay, 8.80 ms negative 1, and then V2 you will obtain a 12.44 ms negative 1. All right, so simultaneous equations, I leave it to you. All right, I'm not going to show you everything, so you try to solve it. Okay, you try to solve the simultaneous equations. So what I want to show you is that when it comes to this type of question, angle is a must. Okay, angle is a must. So you need to know, that's why I told you, you need to know the second method just now. So if you don't know the second method, if you keep it as a V1x and V2x, then you might have a more step to do. Okay, you obtain V1x, V2x. Oh no, you cannot solve it actually. Okay, because you have too many unknowns. So in order to solve this question, this step and this step, they are a must. Okay, you must know how to expand the equation. What does it mean by V1x? What does it mean by V2x? What does it mean by V1y? What does it mean by V2y? All right. So I give you 5 minutes to write it down. Make sure you solve the questions until you get V1 and V2. All right. Make sure you solve the questions until you get V1 and V2. So once you are done, you obtain the answer, then you may leave the class. So that's all for today. We are done with chapter 3. Okay. So if you have any questions, you may ask. So make sure you finish it first. Okay, jangan tak habis, salin sampai ikut saya bulat-bulat, and then kamu terus keluar kelas. No, make sure you try until you get V1 and V2. Okay, because sometimes the answer might be wrong. Don't always trust the answer. Okay, so salin-salin. Kalau dah siap, anda boleh leave class. Kalau belum siap, anda cuba sampai siap. Make sure you get answer for both of them. Because these two questions, they are considered as hot questions.
Okay, madam. Thank you.
All right, good.
Thank you, madam.
Okay.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, madam.
Okay.
Thank you, madam.
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 Okay.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, madam.